Well, good morning. Welcome to the Splash Live. Dave Scott, joined now by Gary Graff, music journalist extraordinaire. Gary, I got your whole Wikipedia resume here. I could read the whole thing, but let's just get to it. I'm really excited to have you here. Gary and I are friends, and I've been a really crappy friend. I'll just say that because I've not stayed in touch with you very well. But I'm so happy you're on the show today, and equally happy that you'll be here in West Bloomfield tonight at Schuler Books. Great outlet, huh? And talking about your new book about Alice Cooper. Gary, good morning. Welcome to the program.
Dave, great to be with you. Great to see you again.
Well, thank you. And Alice Cooper, I mean, what a legendary Detroit rock and roller. I know you've written about so many, Bruce Springsteen, other like Bob Seger, other people here in Detroit. But what motivated you to write this book about Alice Cooper?
Well, what motivated me is a contract. You know, like so many of these things. This is the third book I've done with this particular publisher. And they came to me and they had just started a series about musicians as they turned 75 years old. So they did a David Bowie book and an Elton John book, and they had Alice Cooper on the runway, and they knew of my history writing about him and covering him and felt like it would be a good fit. So, it really was as simple as that.
All right, well, that's a great story. And really, let's talk about Rock and Roller 75. You and I are not quite there. We're working on it pretty hard, but we're not quite there.
Not close.
But
not even halfway.
When I was sitting in the Wheels studio as a kid in the late 70s, it was the early 80s now that I think about it. And, Van Halen would come into the studio, and David Lee Roth and the whole circus. I know you know the whole story of the way those guys toured would come in. They would just do their thing on stage, backstage, in the radio interviews. Back then, I could never imagine that many of these guys would still be around and performing and actually performing it very effectively at this point in their lives.
Nobody, really expected that, and Alice Cooper's maybe a prime example of that. I mean, you have this guy, scourge of society, right?
Sure.
With hacking up baby dolls and playing with snakes, and then, he would cut his head off every night, or he'd hang himself, or he'd electrocute himself. I think everybody, back in around 1973 or 1974, figured this is something that would burn out. There certainly was a part of society that felt that rock and roll would please, burn out and go away, but it didn't. And you now have people like Alice Cooper or Elton John or, David Bowie, who's no longer with us and who we miss, but they are, to our generation, what Frank Sinatra, Ella Fitzgerald, Duke Ellington were to our parents' generation. These are our icons and the people we mark time with and we still listen to now.
Yeah, and it's really cool to see our kids and our kids' kids, many of them as enthusiastic about this music as we were. I think Alice is probably a little bit misunderstood because the Alice Cooper that I've interacted with more recently is really an amazing guy and nothing like you would think he would be based on his onstage persona.
Oh, there's a great duality in Alice Cooper. There is the guy who's on stage, who, like we said, hacking up the baby dolls, all sorts of mayhem. And then there's the Alice Cooper, the other 22 and a half hours of the day, who is is just a very kind, nice, civic-minded, spiritual person who really lives his life doing good things. I always like to say the thing I respect most about Alice is he walks his walk louder than he talks his talk. So he's not out there proselytizing or thumping his chest. He's just doing good things and being a good person. And who would know that from some guy who hacks up baby dolls and cuts its head off on stage.
I'm taking a look at the backstage passes or credentials or whatever all those things are that are right behind you. And, you know, you've had an amazing career. You've lived a life that many of us only dream of. Going to a show, making that your livelihood, hanging out backstage, meeting all these people. And that's somewhat represented with all the badges right behind you. Talk about that.
I mean, it's been great. It's been nothing but a blessing. This is something I've been a writing geek since I was in fourth grade, and then sometime in high school when I was, became a real music fan, I thought, gee, wouldn't that be something great to cover? And I've been able to do it for the better part of my life. The one thing I do say to people though is, yeah, it's great, and you get to do a lot of great things, and you get to meet a lot of interesting people. But it's a job too, and you have to, no matter what happens at the show or after the show, you have to come home and write about it, and you have to treat it seriously. It really is a vocation, but it beats a whole lot of other vocations out there, let me tell you. And if I ever hear me complain, I slap myself. Nobody needs to slap me to understand that. So yeah, it's been nothing but a blessing, and to get to do not only the daily journalism that I do, but then do projects like Alice Cooper at 75 is really, really a great deal of fun. Oh my God, who's that? Take it away, take it away.
Journalist, author Gary Graff with us. Gary, is Detroit special from a music standpoint?
Absolutely. Detroit is such a great music city, and I'll hold it up against all of them. New York, LA, London, Nashville, Austin. Detroit has its own, it doesn't have its own flavor, it has its own flavors. I don't know many cities you can go to where it's not just rock, but it's jazz and rhythm and blues and hip hop, and the place techno was invented, and a gospel community second to none. And having said that, that's just the tip of the iceberg of really an amazing music community. We have the blessing of being this society that was created by the northern migration of the industrial revolution, of the people, especially coming to work in the car plants during the 20s and 30s, and they brought all their culture with them. So Detroit's been such an incredible melting pot of different styles and influences and it all seeps into one another. I don't think Parliament Funkadelic could have been born anywhere but Detroit, or was could have been born anywhere but in Detroit, because that's where you have everything happening with such potency and such vitality. They just bleed into each other.
Well, they do influence each other a lot, but you're right. I mean, we have so many different unique musical genre, and this is absolutely cross-generational. This is just not something that, Berry Gordy and Bob Seger did, and then it was gone. It just keeps happening and keeps happening. There's got to be something in the water here.
It's the water. It's the water. It's the DNA. It's on the streets. I mean, and it's a music community that pays attention to itself. So all these artists are paying attention to each other. The rock people aren't just listening to rock and roll music. They are rubbing elbows with other members of the music community, and they do kind of learn and rub off on each other.
Well, I hope you don't mind me sharing this. I know the story, but I'm going to just read it here from Wikipedia, if I can find the note. But I can't, but I know the story anyway. So, Gary, you were working at the Detroit Free Press. There was a strike, and you would not cross the picket line. I remember it very well. That ended your term at the Detroit Free Press. Any thoughts and look back at those days and just taking that stand at that point in your career? That was a risky thing that you did.
Listen, I enjoyed working at the Free Press for the 15 years I was there. It was a great place to work. Detroit was one of the last two independently owned newspaper battlegrounds, which was just, coming out of journalism school and being able to do that was wonderful. The strike, listen, I still maintain we were in the right. I don't think the company, dealt with us in good faith. Frankly, I don't think our side was particularly well prepared for the war that it became. But I was raised in Pittsburgh, in the bed of the United Steelworkers. I was not going to cross a picket line for a union I was a member of. I was fortunate, very fortunate, that I did have a reputation and had established myself in a way that I could hang up my shingle and continue doing the work that I love to do.
No, you've done it well. But it's always risk, and you did assume some risk. And I obviously, by your words, you stand by that decision many years ago. You also are very involved in a lot of other efforts here in the Metro Detroit area, supporting the community as the producer. One example, the producer of the Detroit Music Awards. It's been 30 some odd years that's been going on, and you've been a driving force behind that.
We had year 32 and co-producer, because I work with a lot of good people in putting it together, although I'm the last of the founders still remaining. And it's a point of pride. We did win one of those Emmy Awards that you mentioned earlier, because when the pandemic hit, in 3.5 weeks, we had to turn what was going to be our 29th live show. I was going to be at the Fillmore. We had to turn around and make that a virtual show. And boy, was that a learning curve, let me tell you, just like everybody else during that period. And we've maintained the virtual show. This year we returned to a hybrid. We actually had a live viewing event for the show at the Imagine in Royal Oak. And, maybe a model for the future. But when I was talking earlier about the bringing together of the music community so that they could kind of rub off on each other. That's one of the goals we've had with the Music Awards. It's the one time of the year we can bring all the tribes together, and they can meet each other and talk to each other, and maybe there will be some collaborations, and there have been some collaborations that have come out of that, and we can not only honor the Detroit music community, but show the Detroit music community who they all are, and try to introduce them to each other and make more good things happen out of it.
Is there still a club scene? When we were kids, we would go to the clubs on the east side, and I'd chase around my friend Doug Podell, who knew that better than anybody.
And still does.
And he does, of course. Is that scene alive at any level anymore? I mean, an old guy like me wouldn't know it, but is it still active?
It is. There's still a very active and vibrant Detroit club scene. You can go out most any nights of the week and hear some original music. Now these musicians making original music have a lot of challenges anymore. One of them is this new preponderance of tribute bands. And listen, I totally get that. I totally get the appeal of that. But it is choking off some sources for bands and artists who are making their original music. So it's a struggle within the scene to try to find a balance of that. But yeah, I could sit here and reel off the names of clubs all over the metro area, from downtown Detroit to newly opened in Rochester to downriver in Wyandotte. It's and in Southfield, there's jazz now. So there's no problem going out on any given night of the week and finding some good live music.
So tonight you're at Schuler Books in West Bloomfield. First of all, very briefly, we're almost out of time. How cool is it that Schuler decided to put a store here in West Bloomfield? I mean, your industry is really, the retail side of it is vanishing.
It's gone.
And here Schuler puts this huge, beautiful store in West Bloomfield. So you're going to be there tonight. Talk about what's going on tonight.
Yeah, and not just because they booked me for this, but I've been a Schuler fan. I did signings of some of my previous books in their stores in the west part of the state, and that was around the time the Borders was going down. And here's this store that, I don't know if they like the comparison or not, but it's a very Borders-like book shopping experience. So tonight, we're going to talk about the book. It's going to be a live taping of the WWJ Daily J podcast with my buddy Zach Clark. He and I work together on the Hello Pine Knob podcast. So Zach's going to kind of moderate the discussion, and hopefully with a lot of Q&A and give and take between myself and those who turn out. We're going to lock the doors so that nobody can leave until they buy a copy of the book.
All right, you got a
And
copy
which
there. I assume your books are available online, and we've got about 30 seconds.
Yeah, they are. Books are available everywhere. Books are sold up to and including the trunk of my car.
Okay, well, we'll see you in the trunk of your car and look forward to learning something new that we might not already know about Alice Cooper tonight and getting a chance to chat with you. Gary Graff, thank you so much for your time.
Dave, thanks so much for having me.
All right, good to see you. Gary Graff in West Bloomfield tonight. You want to be there. Schuler Books, 6:30. I'm going to make every effort to be there myself, and we hope to see you there.